I am going to go through some of the steps for exercise 1, which is mostly geared toward making sure you get the math right and making sure you achieve balance with your designs. So in order to do that, you have to go to the exercise 1 folder in Blackboard and download the image there. It's actually a piece of paper with a drawing on it and some instructions. And you're going to be opening that up in Illustrator and following those instructions. So I've already done the download part, so I'm going to go to Illustrator. I'm going to go to File, New, and I'm going to pick something. I think I'm going to call this exercise 1. And, oh, that's not a good way of writing exercise. All right, and I'm going to have it 8.5 by 11, but I'm going to have it wide, so it's an 8.5 inches tall by 11 inches wide. I hit create. At this point, I want to place the piece of paper that I've downloaded. Now, I'm not going to use it to trace or anything, but I just want it kind of off to the side so I can use it for reference. I'm going to go to File, Place. I'm going to find Robot Sketch, and I'm going to place it in the document. Now I'm going to make it about the same size as the document simply by taking my cursor and click dragging it so that it's about the same size. There. All right. Now I'm not going to have it on the screen, so I'm going to take my selection tool and move it off to the side. And I'm going to back up a little bit. All right. So let's look at what it says right now. So I'm going to zoom in. First of all, it's going to ask for 2 final products. It's going to have one Illustrator file of a single robot and then an Illustrator file of a robot grid. I'll talk about the robot grid at some other time. Right now I'm going to focus on the single robot. Okay, so the single robot, even though there are outlines here, it says here quite clearly that there are no outlines. The shapes are all in white except when specified. There's a background color is BC, so you'll see it here, background color, and some lines pointing to where those background colors could be. The dimensions of the robot will be 3.5 by 2.5, and then the rest are instructions for what happens once you've completed that. So the first thing I would probably want to do is create a background of the specified color. And this specified color, if you look in this line right here, it mentions colors in hexadecimal format. So hexadecimal is a way of communicating to a number of printer programs and screen programs what color you actually want. So this hexadecimal number is right here, and so basically to get that up on the screen, I just go over to the tool palette, and at the bottom I click on the color picker. I double click here. Up comes the color picker dialog box, and I just put in right under here where it says number, I put the hexadecimal number that I have there. Okay. 1, 4, 2, 3, 8. And when I hit return, it gives the color that I want. Before I put it down, I don't want a stroke, so I'm going to choose the stroke as null set. So I just have fill. And now I'm going to just scooch over, and I'm going to back up a little bit. Now I'm just going to use the rectangle tool and making sure that Smart Guides is on, which will allow me to snap to the edge. I will click drag all the way over the entire artboard and let go. And now I have that red color that was specified. I'm going to go to the layers palette. I'm going to lock that layer so I don't have to, I'm not going to move it or anything else. And I'm going to click on a new layer, and everything else I'll just build on that new layer. Now I'm not going to worry about the size right now because I can build the robot of any shape, and then with the selection tool I can resize it when I need to. If I look at this robot, there's pretty much 4 shapes that I need to worry about. There's the rectangle tool, which are specified by these shapes that have hard right angle edges. There's the rounded rectangle tool, which is evident over the head and the torso and the legs. There's the ellipse tool or the circle, and there's the triangle tool. So basically, to make these shapes, I go to the shape tool, I go to the properties palette, I make sure it's white as specified, and I'm just going to draw some of these shapes out for you. First of all, easy enough, the rectangle tool, the straight rectangle tool, I just click and drag until it's the size that I want. Now, to make a rounded rectangle, I basically do the same thing. And notice when I move out that sometimes you'll see this magenta line. That's telling me that Smart Guides is on, and it's trying to do a job of aligning one of the squares with the other. Now this one's going to be different because if you'll notice these anchor point looking things on the inside of the square, I can pull on any one of those, and that allows me to create a rounded rectangle tool. I'll have to drag it into the center. That's what I'm looking for. And so there's the difference between the rectangle and the rounded rectangle. The circle, just you go back to the shape tool and you go to the ellipse and you drag out a circle. Now as long as the circle has that magenta basically cross lines in it, that's telling me that that's a circle. The minute I pull it out into ellipse, it tells me that it's not a perfect circle because those lines go away. So as long as I keep them in view, I know that the circle's there, thanks to Smart Guides. All right, and I can change that. The other way to make a circle rather than an ellipse is to hold down the Shift key when you're making the circle. Now, for the last shape, I'm going to go back to the shape tool, and I'm going to hit the polygon tool. And I want whatever polygon that I'm going to make, I want it kind of level at the bottom here. So I'm going to hold down to the Shift key, and I'm going to drag it. And notice that when I do drag it out, what I'm seeing here is a hexagon. The hexagon is the default shape that you make whenever you use the polygon tool. Now, if you look along the edges of this selection, when you have the selection tool selected, you'll notice on the side that this little button just above the expanding button is, if you'll see plus and minus, that alters the amount of sides that this polygon will have. So if I drag it up, if there's 5 sides, there's 4 sides, and that's 3 sides. And so that's a triangle. So you make a hexagon and then turn it into a triangle with that slider. Now that triangle for me might be a little wide. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use the selection tool and drag one side in. And that's how to narrow things up. All right, so I have pretty much all the basic shapes that would be required to make this object. And now the goal is to make various elements of this object and then also to create it in such a way that it's replicated and even. The whole point of this is to make sure that the spaces are even, that it looks like it was considered from a mathematical perspective. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is make that antenna. I'm going to just take that triangle and push it up into the circle, and because I have the Smart Guides on, it'll tell me when that's correct. I might bring that in just a little bit more and then move it over again. There, I think that's what I'm looking for. Now, if you'll notice under here, there are 2 more squares or 2 more rectangles, so I'm going to go back to my rectangle tool and make a shape. There's certain things that I haven't specified in this exercise, and I'm going to leave that up to you. All right, so I'm going to zoom in a little bit just to get a little bit more control over it. I might bring this in just a little bit. and I'm going to move it around until it snaps to where I want it to be. Now I'm going to drag another one. If you'll notice, if you go back, you'll see there's one that's about the same thickness, but a little bit wider. So I'm going to show you how to do that. I'm going to grab this and I'm going to hold on to the Option key and I'm going to drag this down. And notice it's going to tell me when it's perfectly spaced. All right, so this one has to be wider, but it's going to be the same height. So I'm going to grab an edge and I'm going to hold on to the Option key this time. And watch, when I drag it out, it drags it out evenly from both sides. Try not to make it any wider. That is what I'm looking at. So now I have this object. That is the antenna on the top of the head. It might be a little bit large right now. So if I want to change that, I just grab the whole thing. And holding on to the Shift key so that I preserve the proportions, I can bring it in a little bit. Maybe I'll bring it in a little, just a teeny bit more. Okay. And since I have that, I might as well group it. And the easiest way to group it is to hit Command G. Now this is a grouped object, and I can move this around. And that's grouping objects are going to be very, very important for centering, because that's going to be, that's just an important element to remember. Now that I've grouped it, I'm going to make the antennas, or I don't know, ears, I don't know what they are, on either side. In order to make the ears on either side, what you're going to have to do is replicate it. But notice that if I replicate it now, the things with the ears on the sides, it has only one rectangle as opposed to two. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click drag to copy this. So I'm going to, with the selection tool, I'm going to click drag it to make, option drag rather. Now I have two. But I'm going to take this one and I'm going to ungroup it. Now to ungroup it, I can hit Shift Command G, ungroups. And the advantage of ungrouping is it allows me to select one of these and delete it. Now these are the earpieces, and I want two of them exactly the same, so I'm going to group this again, Command G, and then I'm going to option drag it. So now that I have two. So now I have the earpieces for the robot, and I also have the antenna on the top. I'm going to take this rounded rectangle that I already made. Why waste it? And I'm going to move it underneath and see how that looks. I might bring it, I don't know, I might bring it in a little bit. Now I'm going to bring it wider. I'm going to make sure it's nice and centered underneath. And I might make it wider. So again, I'm going to hold on to the Options key. So when I make it wider, it widens from both sides. And I'm going to bring it in. Now, notice it doesn't, because this is a grouped object, this is grouped here, it's not going to be able to read the difference between these two rectangles in order to tell me where I need to be, right? So the way you fix that is actually you go back to this and you ungroup it, Shift Command G. I know I've ungrouped this a couple times now, but now that allows the calculation of these two rectangles. So when I grab this rectangle, notice it now tells me, you can see the magenta on the right hand side, that it's equally spaced. I'm going to make sure that it's evenly centered, and now this is the right size and where it should be. It's probably close enough. I'm not going to, there's no dimensions over here, so I'm going to kind of live with what I have there. All right, so we've kind of solved that problem. At this point, we could take these objects, they're individually grouped objects, and we can set them around for the ears. Okay, so if I rotate something, to rotate something, I go to the outer edge with the selection tool, and you'll see that bent arrow tool. If I hold down to the Shift key, it's going to bend it in 45-degree increments. That allows me to bend it once, twice, and I know that it's a perfect 90, and now it's completely centered with the head. I do the same thing to the other side, and I turn it this way, and then I can bring it and center it with the head as well. All right. I'm not sure how, in terms of this distance, do I want this distance to be the same as this? Do I want it to be wider? I'm not sure. I think what I'm going to do now is I'm going to work on the eyes on the inside. And so to do that, I'm going to go to the shape tool again, and I'm going to use the ellipse tool, and I'm going to make a circle. Now I want the circle to originate from the center out rather than the outside, and I'll show you what I mean. When I take a regular, when I take the ellipse tool and I just draw a circle, notice how I'm drawing the circle from the edge. In this case, I want to draw it from the center because I want to know about how big it is and I want to get some more cues that way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into this somewhere in the center of the rectangle. I'm going to hold on to the shift key to preserve the circle quality, but I'm also going to hold on to the option key so when it grows from the center. And I'm going to make it roughly that size. All right. Now, if I look at how things are specified here, this circle needs to be the background color. So with this selected, if I want to turn that into a background color, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the eyedropper tool or hit the eye on the keyboard, select the eyedropper tool, and just click on the background. And even though the background is locked, I can still color sample from it. And I've just turned that circle into a different color. All right, so I'm going to now go toward the center of that circle. And I'm going to take another ellipse tool. I'm going to take the ellipse tool. I'm going to go from the center again. I'm going to hit Shift Option, and I'm going to grow another circle. Command Z. Shift Option. Then I make it bigger. I've kind of got it off center there for a little bit, which is okay because I can still now take this and move it into the center so it's exactly where it needs to be, thanks to the Smart Guide again. I'm going to turn that white, and I have that double eye that we've been talking about. Okay, so I'm going to select this, and I'm going to shift click so I select both these, and I'm going to turn that into a group. Command G. And now I'm going to option drag that, take the option key, and I'm going to drag it over. Notice it doesn't really tell me, it tells me where it's centered, but it doesn't really do a very good job of telling me how far it is from the other one. So I'm going to try to do it by eye, but then if the whole point of this is not to do it by eye. And in fact, I purposely moved it over. If you can tell, this is a little bit more space than this one. So how do I get that perfectly centered? Because that's kind of the name of the game in terms of what we're doing. Well, what I want to do is I want to center these two eyes in this head. And so I have to think of these two eyes as a single thing that needs to be centered, and then the head as a separate thing that I want to center it in. And this is where I bring in the alignment tool. So I go to Window, and I go to Align, and I bring that up. Now before this, for this to work, I'm going to have to group the two eyes together, because if I don't group them, the space will not be preserved and they'll all both be in the center. So I'm going to click on this guy, and then I'm going to go over and shift click on this guy, and I'm going to group them. Command G again. Now I'm going to take that, and where it says vertically align center, I'm going to hit that button, and it's probably already vertically aligned. How about horizontally align center? I click that, and notice nothing happens. The reason why nothing's happened is I haven't selected what it's going to align to. All right, so first what I'm going to have to do is go to the Align Tool button on the tool palette right here, and I want to align it to the selection. Now, in order to align it to the selection, I have to tell it what the selection is. And the selection is, I'm going to click on this guy, and then I'm going to shift click so I select this guy as well. And now when I vertically align it, notice what happens. It now shifts. And now that thing is perfectly aligned. There might have been some shifting in the back. In fact, I definitely saw the big rectangle shift. So the first thing I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to group this, Command G, and now I'm going to have to then get the selection tool and just make sure that everything is back aligned. And once it tells me it's aligned, then I know I'm good. So now we know math-wise that everything is aligned and everything is of equal space. I'm going to bring that down and just until I hit that just to make sure. Now what to do with these things on the side? I would like probably to make this all the same. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure this distance and I'm going to make sure that this is the same distance. But we talked about this earlier. If I do that, it doesn't tell me where the ideal distance is, right? And the alignment tool is really not going to help me either. It'll center it, but it won't tell me what that real distance is. I could try to eyeball it, but eyeballing it is not the name of the game here. We really want to measure. And so this is when you're going to use the shape tool, but in this case, the rectangle tool is not going to act as a shape builder, but as a measuring device. I'm going to click on the shape tool, the rectangle. I'm going to go to the fill and I'm going to pick a color that is not in the group. So I'm going to pick a nice brilliant blue. But first I'm going to not select something. So Command, I'm going to select off of something so that when I go and make a square, I can actually color that blue. There we go. Now, with that colored blue, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. It's hard to get these small squares are hard to maneuver unless you move in a little. I'm going to take my selection tool. I'm going to move it up here. And then I'm going to shrink it down holding the Shift key. I'm going to shrink it down so that it fits right there. It's telling me the exact size. If you'll notice, that magenta line told me that I had achieved the right size. Now I'm going to go closer. And I'm going to move this here. I know that that square, the width of that square, or any dimension of that square, is the same as this. So now all I have to do is take this and bring it so it meets that square. Now I know for a fact that within any realm of measurement, that is this distance and that distance are the same. So I'm going to click on this, maybe get a little closer. Sometimes I select it, and if I could hit Command X, that makes it go away. I can move over to another place and hit Command V, and it pops up in that place, which is kind of helpful. And I'm going to just do the same thing here. I'm just going to line it up. And I'm going to bring this in. I'm going to select this guy, bring it in, make sure it continues to be aligned up. And there you go. Command X just to get it out of there. And I'm going to back up. Okay, so I've made the head, and I could go on and make the other parts, but now I've shown you all the tools that you need to finish the rest of this project. You have now learned how to use the alignment tool and how to line it to the selection, and I've shown you how to use the square as a measurement tool, and probably most importantly, I showed you how to use the smart guides to make the piece work. So good luck with the project, and let me know if you have any questions.